Good morning. That set me off thinking, actually, Fred, Alexa, and distracted me. This morning I flew in from Seattle on the red eye. I hate red eyes. Hands up who hates red eyes. Yes. I would pay extra not to have a red eye. In other words, to have a bed where I could lie down and I would wake up maybe an hour or two later. They took a little bit longer to fly. I'd pay more for that service. You know, everybody, 4.5 hours from Seattle, great service, but unfortunately not quite enough time to sleep. So I missed this morning's session. Last year, I was allowed to speak, and I was given 15 minutes to talk about NDC. This year, ATPCO are so happy with me, they've given me 10. But actually, they told me it was 8, so that's why I've had a really long introduction, and I'm sort of enjoying myself at your expense. So my name is Richard Clarke. I'm the CEO of T2RL. T2RL help airlines buy technology solutions and help them make decisions on architecture and solutions and how they should think about their application portfolio, not only from a technical perspective, but from a commercial perspective. Because out there are a lot of technology providers that also like to make money. And if they're really, really clever technology providers, they will price their technology so that you have to say yes, i.e. there's a good business case, but a big slice of that money comes to them. Okay, that's called business, and we shouldn't be scared of that, but what we should do is we should focus on the contract that exists between us and the technology provider, and that's what we do. At the risk of upsetting some people, I'm going to be a little bit controversial, I'm afraid. And the reason that I'm going to be controversial is I'm going to talk about the unintended consequences of NDC. The unintended consequences. So an intended consequence is something we plan for, and we know it's going to happen, and we like it. And unintended consequences might be something we like, but generally not, actually. And what I'm going to say now is that at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you some advice, and that advice is free, and you should take it, because otherwise I'm going to charge you the next time I meet you to take that advice. So our business is all about looking at demand and supply and how that demand and supply is working. NDC clearly has demand, and I think Ian Tunnicliffe, one of the co-founders of T2RL, and myself, we now completely agree that there's some great opportunity with respect to revenue. It's clear that having the ability to differentiate the product, working with people at ATPCO, branded fares, being able to differentiate the solutions for customers is helping people improve and increase their revenue. There's no doubt that there's demand for NDC, and 20% for 21 by 2020. I don't believe that's going to happen, and the reason I don't believe it's going to happen is because the metric that IATA have used is flown bookings. I believe we will be on a ramp that will get us somewhere close, but we're not going to make 20%. Sorry, IATA, just don't believe it's going to happen unless a GDS flips the switch and calls it NDC. All right, so that could happen. So essentially, the airlines are faced with a choice. So there are lots of choices out there, but as far as we're concerned at T2RL, there's actually only 3 choices. There are 3 choices for NDC from a supply of technology perspective. The first is that you can build it and you can integrate it with your PSS. Okay, now Rob Brown's here from Southwest. Southwest have built, they've had an API strategy for many years. They provide that API to their partners. They manage that, and they built that themselves. They're pretty good at IT. They spend a lot of money on IT. They have a lot of good people. They have economies of scale, but they built it themselves, and they run it themselves, okay? And they integrate that with their PSS. And that was all part of the original contract between Southwest and Amadeus. You can go out and buy NDC and integrate it with your PSS provider. You can go out and acquire solutions from the marketplace. There's quite a lot of solution providers out there who will help you do that. Or, in fact, you can go along to your PSS provider and say, please can I buy an NDC API? Now, if you think about this for a minute, an API is about something that is consumed and something that is created. Somebody has to create the API to be consumed. Simple. There's a little bit of work to do. If you look at a PSS today, it doesn't necessarily have all of the things you want out of the box. It doesn't have this concept of offer and order. So there's a little bit of work to do. Offer, order, organize themselves, orchestrate those web services that they built for underlying PSS. But actually, a PSS provider is in pretty good shape to supply an NDC API. So you're faced with three choices. Now, this is data. I know in the United States you have this thing called facts and alternative facts. But we, in the rest of the world, I'm afraid, have just facts and then not facts. So we're going to deal with this very simply. There are three providers that control, and I say control, i.e. have contracts for passengers, accounting for 73% of the world's passengers boarded. Okay? So within the application set PSS, there is an application generally referred to as inventory and generally reservations. There are three providers that have 73%. Amadeus, number one, 43% of the global market share with two products, Amadeus Navitaire, Amadeus Altéa. Sabre, with their Sabre Sonic products, have about 16% inventory of the world's inventory inside their systems. And TravelSky, who have about 14% of the world's inventory within their systems. And then there's a group of airlines that have built their own stuff, and they have about 12 or 13%, depending on how you measure it. And we include people like EasyJet in that bucket. So the reality is, NDC can be supplied by those three providers probably more easily and possibly more efficiently than it can be by others. Why? Because you have to integrate with the PSS. Well, what does it mean, integrate? It means that you have to be able to take your inventory, be able to make that into an offer, and distribute that to the relevant partners. The bottom line is, if 73% of the world's inventory resides within three systems, and by the way, if we take China out of the equation, Amadeus is at 50%, just over, of the world market. We're now down to a set of conversations that their fair share of NDC will probably be something, well, eventually approximating to 50%. And left unchecked, please forgive me when I say left unchecked, Amadeus will continue to grow at an interesting pace, which means that Amadeus will be a supplier of NDC APIs, whatever anybody in this room thinks. I happen to know because I'm buying it, but the bottom line is Amadeus is going to make a lot of money from NDC. Now, they're also going to build their NDC aggregation capability. Okay, so now the stack of services, we've got NDC aggregation, we've got NDC APIs, underneath it we've got a PSS. So what is the unintended consequence of NDC? Simple. Amadeus, Sabre, TravelSky will get richer. Okay? Now, if I came into this room 5 years ago and said NDC is going to make Amadeus, Sabre, and TravelSky richer, how many of you would have agreed? How many would have agreed? Yes, because Ian works at T2RL, he knows. Nobody else, right? That is an unintended consequence. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's be clear. But let's also be clear that when we pay for things, we need to think about the long term. We need to think about what that means from an architecture perspective. We need to start thinking about where is our inventory? Who is managing the inventory? Business side managing the inventory? What's the technology that's managing the inventory? We need to think about that. We need to think about how that inventory will be presented. We need to think about maybe new architectures. And here's the rub. The one thing everyone in this room should do as an airline, and by the way, I'm in procurement, so this is breaking all the rules, is sign up for NDC Exchange. Let me tell you why. It's really, really, really cheap. relative to commercial alternatives in the market. It is really, really good, and it evolves over time, and it is owned by the airlines themselves as a group. This is important, okay? Because in the long run, if none of you believed that Amadeus was going to get richer through NDC, I'm not saying you're stupid, but I'm saying you might not have thought that through all the way to the end. All right? Now, it's true we don't always have the luxury of thinking about these things all the way through to the end, because there are pressing matters, like our CEO knocking on the door saying, please, can you get us up to speed with NDC? How many times has that happened in your organizations? Lots, lots. Because they don't want to fall behind, they don't want to be part of the non-retailing revolution, and they want to be sure that they can differentiate their products, and they've been told, quite rightly, that NDC carries some benefits. But some of the costs attached to that are not quite so clear, okay? So if you do anything after this conference and sign up for NDC Exchange, that is a brilliant idea. I'm in procurement, I know it's good value, okay? So I've now run over, and I take an additional 3 minutes, as I always do. And thank you very much. Have a good day.